You're watching Fugitive Red Eye, and welcome to another episode of Takeshi Tuesdays. Today we'll be talking about another movie, but it's not one that Takeshi directed, only one that he starred in. And to be fair, it's a movie he was only in about 20 minutes of, and it has a 2-hour runtime overall. Today we'll be talking about the 1986 film Comic Magazine, which was directed by Yojiro Takeda and stars Yuya Uchida. It was released on February 1st, 1986, and runs for approximately 2 hours or 120 minutes. This is one that is different than the others in that I wasn't able to understand what everyone was saying for the simple fact that I had to import this movie straight from Japan. That was the only way to see it. And on top of that, it had no subtitles. Whereas Achilles and the Tortoise had an English subtitle track, this one had no subtitle tracks whatsoever. So I was stuck with watching a movie and trying to figure out what was going on just based on what was going on the screen. I will say this, though. I was still able to figure it out pretty well, and there actually were a couple of scenes where characters spoke English. Incidentally, I will also mention that this did win 2 awards for the Hochi Film Awards. It did win both Best Film and Best Actor. But as far as I know, this movie was never released outside of Japan, and there's very little information about it on Wikipedia. The movie follows this tabloid journalist named Kinamari, who's going around trying to get a big scoop. Trying to get a big break. He's still fairly successful, it's just he wants to get a big story. So most of the movie is just him going around reporting on things and trying to get, bigger stories. This does lead to him getting in a few scraps. Drinks get thrown on him, whipped cream gets sprayed in his face, he gets punched, things happen to him because he's one of those up-in-your-face journalists, like those really annoying ones that kind of go and harass you. And that's kind of his character through most of the film. I will say, I am going to spoil this movie. I don't usually spoil movies when I review them, but since there's not a lot of people that have talked about this online, I'm going to do that for this one, so you have been warned. Throughout the movie, he's going around trying to get a big scoop, and then eventually, one of the more intense scenes towards the end is when he's interviewing this group of girls, and this guy comes in, beats him up, and kidnaps one of the girls while he's interviewing her. That's not addressed again, but it does cause him to become kind of a drunk and kind of lose his way for a minute, before another big scoop does show up in that there's this businessman that barricades himself inside his house, or more specifically, his apartment. It's at this apartment complex where we get introduced to Takeshi's character. Now, Takeshi is not the businessman, as you may guess, which I originally thought he was going to be, given I did read some of the plot synopsis online before watching it just to have a better idea of what was going on. But even then, every article that I've seen about it on IMDb, Wikipedia, whatever, all of them are stubs and don't give you the full plot details, so I was still left very much in the dark on it. But like I said, I was still able to piece it together because it was very self-explanatory visually. I just didn't know what characters were saying at all times. While he's at that apartment complex, one of the neighbors, played by Takeshi, who, again, I can't find his name listed, but I can find Kinamari's. Takeshi comes in, and he's mad about this businessman who locked himself in his apartment, so he starts breaking into it. Takeshi and one other guy break into this apartment and go in while the reporters are all gathered around. Of course, one of those reporters being Kinamari, the main character. So they're standing there as Takeshi and this other assailant go in and brutally start to murder the businessman who's barricaded himself inside the apartment. All of the reporters are just standing around taking pictures and thinking, oh, this is interesting, this is a scoop. But the main character, Kinamari, comes to the realization that this is pretty fucked up right here. And he jumps through the window and decides, I'm going to stop this from happening. So he goes and he attempts to stop Takeshi and the other guy from killing the businessman. However, Takeshi and the other guy beat up Kinamari and wound him, while they still successfully murder the businessman. As Takeshi and the other assailant both leave, the reporters just kind of try to question them because, again, they want a big scoop, but they ignore them and eventually get in an elevator and leave the apartment complex. After Takeshi and the other assailant have left, Kinamari is able to get back up and stumble his way out of the apartment, only to be swarmed by the other reporters. As they swarm around him, he comes to the realization that this kind of reportive journalism is not a good thing. So he decides to pretend he can't speak English, which leads to the final line of the movie, which is my favorite part of the entire movie. They're all gathered around him basically asking him what the hell happened in there, and he's like, I don't speak fucking Japanese. Which is actually a callback to that scene where the girl got kidnapped because she said, I can't speak Japanese when he was interviewing her because one of the other girls could, but she couldn't. So that was a callback to that scene. And then it shows him throw his microphone away in a baseball stadium, symbolically saying he gives up on being a reporter. I assume they're using the term comic magazine in this movie to mean tabloid magazine, although he is a television tabloid journalist, so I'm not entirely sure where the name comes from. But it actually goes under an alternate title known as No More Comics, which is actually what the DVD case says. Also, I'm looking through the IMDb page as I'm recording this, so I'm finding out more information as I go along. Apparently, Takeshi's character is credited as police. So I guess it was a police officer that brutally murdered the person inside. I didn't get any indication of that in the movie, so I don't know how true that is, but I just thought I'd mention that it does say that here on the IMDb page. Another thing that I do want to mention is I did read somewhere that this is actually based on an actual scandal that happened. Okay, so I'm looking here at the My Drama List page of Comic Magazine, and that gives us a little bit more insight into the actual scandal which this film is based on. And I'm just reading this quote for quote off My Drama List, so just know these aren't my words, these are the words of My Drama List. And it says, a powerhouse reenactment of the 1985 ethics scandal that rocked the Japanese journalistic world. Pop star Yuya Uchida plays a TV entertainment reporter who is egged on by his boss to pump up his telecasts. He gets the opportunity when a prominent investment manager caught in the middle of a fraudulent gold investment scheme, locks himself in his lavish home. Let's see here. So, there was a 1985 ethics scandal that this is based off of. I'm going to quickly look that up, and then I will tell you if I find any more information. So, unfortunately, I wasn't able to find any more information. I did look into this for a minute here, but I couldn't find any more information on the original scandal that this was based on. I do believe I actually read a little bit about it in the book I'm currently reading, Beat Takeshi vs. Takeshi Kitano, but I can't remember what specifically was said about it. So unfortunately, I'm not able to dive too much into the real scandal upon which this movie is loosely based. One other thing I do want to mention is the irony is not lost on me that this is a movie released in 1986, starring Takeshi Kitano, and it involves tabloid journalism. Now, when I say the irony is not lost on me, if you don't know, in December 1986, so 10 months after this movie came out, Takeshi himself was involved in a little scandal involving tabloids. There was a tabloid magazine known as Friday that published an article about him, something to do with him having an affair with some young actress or something. Again, I did a whole video on this back during season 1, and I can't remember if and I couldn't figure out whether or not it was a true affair that they were reporting on and he got mad at that, or if he was mad because they were making up lies or something like that. I'm not entirely sure. Like I said, I did do a whole video on that, but the point is he snapped and went and attacked the offices of this tabloid, and I just think it's a bit ironic. He was in a movie about tabloid journalism where he plays a violent character. Again, it's not quite the same as the actual thing that would happen later that year to him, but I do think it's just a bit ironic. Overall, though, Comic Magazine is a great movie, and I highly recommend checking it out if you haven't. Unfortunately, like I said, there are no subtitles, so you do have to watch it in Japanese, and I'm sure I would have liked it even more if I was able to understand what people were saying for most of the film. But that said, I do think it's a shame that it never got released over here. It's kind of a lost gem over here in the West. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Comic Magazine. Maybe they didn't bring it over here because of how topical it was to the Japanese with the scandal that it's being based on happening a year before the movie. So it was a very topical piece that was a product of its time there, but I think bringing it over here would have been a pretty acceptable thing to do. Even if we don't get the full context of it, it's still an entertaining movie. But yeah, that's all I have to say about Comic Magazine. This has been Fugitive Red Eye. I'll see you next time.